Tea time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah, this is tea time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time, time.
Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. It is tea time again, and today I have an incredible guest joining me in the studio. I have BRUCE OLAV. He is a UFO researcher, professor, and author. That is right. I am going paranormal life today. We are doing different. We are spilling tea on different topics. So sit back, grab your tea, get your questions, get your comments ready, and join us in. I'd love to have your questions come up. But before we do any of that, I'm going to do the disclaimer and then we're going to jump in and have some tea with BRUCE and find out what his TEA is today on Tea Time with Miss Liz. So the disclaimer for Miss Liz is Tea Time live shows. Miss Liz myself is going live using StreamYard.com. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to use your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that content brought forward for any tea times hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith, however, may bring forth dialogue and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All tea time guests and audience and participants are responsible for using their good judgment in taking any action that may relate to this discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some that may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to note that this show is only engaging in discussions forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about this disclaimer or panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in this show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. Should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I respect that as well, and I will see you at a future show at a later date. Now I'm going to bring BRUCE up. Welcome, BRUCE.
Hello.
Lots of words to say.
Yeah.
But I want my viewers and listeners to know that there is a disclaimer because there are topics that may trigger some people at certain times. And that.
Yeah.
So BRUCE, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit. And for anybody that wants to know more on BRUCE, you can check out Miss Liz's Tea Times Facebook page, LinkedIn, and YouTube page. All of the information on BRUCE and all that will be in the description box. And BRUCE, I'll let you introduce yourself because you have such an incredible bio. So if you'd like to share with all the viewers out there who you are.
Okay. My name is BRUCE OLAV SOLHEIM, and I'm the son of Norwegian immigrants who came to this country after World War II. They lived under Nazi occupation. My dad was in a labor camp. And my oldest brother died during World War II because the Nazis took all the medicine. So I grew up with a lot of stories about World War II and Nazis and all that stuff, and that, they came here to start over. And my brother and I were born in Seattle. My sister was born in Norway. And it's just my brother and I now. Everybody else is gone of the older generation. I went to the University of Washington, dropped out, joined the Army. So I was in the Army for 6 years as a jail guard, and then I went to flight school and flew helicopters. I worked as a defense contractor for Boeing.
Wow.
With kind of a military government thing. And then I decided to, kept getting, my education and decided to go into a doctoral program, Bowling Green State University in Northwestern Ohio. And I got my Ph.D. in history. And with an idea that I wanted to teach, which is what I've been doing for the past over 30 years. I've been teaching history, mostly at a community college here in Southern California called Citrus College. And along the way, I've I have 4 children, 2 grandchildren, and I'm married to a very wonderful lady named Ginger.
Well, there you go. And that is all in the bio that is on the Facebook page and that will be in the description as well. For anyone who's listening to the audio part of this tea time, that will be all in the description and that. And also, Bruce, I wanted to have you on my tea time because you have the Norwegian blood in you. And my heritage is from Norway as well. So that was the connection that I really wanted when I was giving your name, right? I was like, I have to have that man. Like, I need to know about Norway. I need to know about all of the history of it and that. And the World War II, the history and the connection of that as well. Because my great grandmother, who actually got me to drink my first cup of tea, was from Germany. So she's a survivor. Well, she has passed now, but she was a survivor of the war. So so I want to get into the paranormal life. I want to get right into it really quickly. I want to get really deep into the tea. When was your first experience with paranormal?
Well, it was in Norway, actually. So it kind of, for me, it begins in Norway. The first experience, I was like 4 or 5 years old in northern Norway, living with my parents in my grandmother's house. We lived there for 9 months to visit relatives. It was the first time, this was in 1962, 1963. And my parents went there to connect again with the relatives. They hadn't been there since 1948, so it'd been a long time. And we lived there for 9 months. And during that time, I remember once I got really sick. I'd been out playing in the snow in wintertime. And my neck got really stiff. My limbs started to hurt. I started to have trouble breathing. I had a terrible headache and a fever. And I made my way home, and I got into this little bed that my grandmother had in the kitchen in this old country house that my brother and I still own. And in that kitchen, I just got really sick. And the neighbors, who are all our relatives, because it's a small village, came in and said, "Oh, this is what happens when, you get polio," or "This is what happens when," they were just, it was all this Grim Reaper kind of talk. And I was crying. I thought I was going to die. And my grandmother and my mother were very upset. And so I remember I fell asleep crying. And then when I woke up, there's nobody in the kitchen, but I saw this light in the ceiling between the beams, this old kitchen, and in the ceiling. And the light had kind of a presence to it, and it made me feel like everything was going to be okay. So I stopped crying and I stopped worrying, and I went back to sleep. And when I woke up, I told my mom and my grandmother about this light and how it had made me feel better and made, healed me. And they said, "Well, that's your guardian angel, and that's a miracle." And from that day forward, it opened up this other world to me. I just, everything that's supernatural was natural. Everything that was considered paranormal was normal to me. And so I just started having, things that I remember from that point on, a very paranormal life that I usually had to keep hidden, because my mom taught me early on. She was very psychic, and we used to practice reading each other's minds until my father told us to knock it off because he didn't like it. But my mom would wink at me, and we'd do it again another time when Dad wasn't around. But so I grew up with that being very normal, but I learned very quickly that I couldn't talk about it at school because I would be ridiculed, or the teacher would say that's bad, or that's of the devil or something, and just make, some kind of comment like that, even though my parents couldn't have been more spiritual or religious, being part of the Norwegian Lutheran Church. But this was another aspect to it, And so I grew up with that, knowing that I had to kind of keep it hidden. And of course, in the military and working for Boeing, and even working in academia as a professor, I couldn't talk about this paranormal aspect of my life without facing possible, losing my security clearance if it was the military or at Boeing, or losing my job. It's not something that when you're in a job interview, they ask you, "What other talents do you have?" And I said, "Well, I can talk to dead people." That's not something you want to bring up unless you're
there comes a straitjacket, right?
unless you want to go for a psychic job or something. But so I had to keep it hidden. But in 2016, a dear friend of mine died, and his parents were also Norwegian immigrants. He's from Seattle. name was Gene. His name is Gene, actually. And he told me a month after he died, he came to me in a vision where it's just like you and I are talking. We were talking. It was, an intelligent conversation. And he told me, okay, now it's time for you to tell your stories. And I said, what stories? I kind of knew what he meant, but wanted to get him out of him. He said, everything that's happened to you, don't be afraid. It'll be okay. The time is right now to start telling these stories. And I said, okay, because I'd collected them, and I just never published them or told anybody really. And he said, no, it'll be okay. And he said, you should call the book Timeless, because where I am, there is no past, there's no future. It's all just together. It's all an eternal now. And he explained it to me and how wonderful it was, and not to be afraid of dying. And, because he said, if you're afraid of dying, you're afraid of living, So he had all these great, bits of wisdom. And he was a pretty wise, funny, loving person when he was here, but even more so enhanced in the other side. So that got me started just saying, okay, I'll do it. And so next thing you know, I published 3 books, a whole trilogy of all my paranormal stories. And then I went even farther with the Anzar book, where I focus on one particular entity who happens to be the best way I can describe him is an ancient alien mystic whom I've been in contact with. And so this is what's been going on. And I owe it all to Gene by telling me it was going to be okay. And my mother for teaching me how to connect with the other world and these powers that really all of us have, but not a whole lot of people acknowledge it, and they don't, train it. And I think that we're missing out on something. So that's kind of my mission, is to be honest about what's happened to me. I'm not worried about losing my job. I'm nearing retirement. What are they going to do to me? I'm a senior professor, So there's nothing that can really happen to me. It'd be different if I was early in my career. It might be different. But so that is how it came about. And just when you think it can't get any weirder, something weirder happens, and you expand your knowledge and experience space. And as Gene always says, he says, experiencing is believing, and believing is experiencing. So once you have an experience, you believe, oh, that really happened. It opens up another door, and then you have that, and then it opens up another, and just keeps going. So it's just like education. You never stop learning, unless you shut yourself off. And I haven't done that. The one thing I did have to learn how to do, talking about psychic abilities and stuff, is I had to learn how to manage it better, because my whole life it had been kind of frequent but random, and sometimes overwhelming, to the point where I couldn't go to I'd be very uncomfortable going to a party with a lot of people, because I would walk in there and most people would hear the noise, the din of the party, but I would also hear people's intentions, not so much reading their minds, and it was very uncomfortable, because, you don't want to know all this, what people are not necessarily thinking, but what their real intention is. It's kind of it's like you hear the text and the subtext at the same time. It's like they might say, oh, how are you? But then you also hear, I don't really care how you are. Oh, that's unnerving. I don't want to know that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, I really know what you want to tell me, but you just don't want to tell me. You're just being nice, but the subconscious is actually talking to me.
A lot of people, they call it intuition, right? And it's a psychic ability.
Yeah.
You hear somebody say something, but what I call it, in writer's terms, it's the text and the subtext at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that brings me to where we are. And the Anzar book was kind of I kind of dipped my toes in the paranormal at first, because I didn't want to come out immediately in the first book and start talking about full blown alien stuff. So I, just started with the more conventional, if there is such a thing as conventional paranormal, ghosts and things like that, and angels, but it's all part of the same realm, whether it's I always say that, my theory is that the spirit world, the alien world, and the quantum world are all the same thing. And that's the connection point. So it's, and there are a lot of people much smarter than me who subscribe to the same idea, including the late Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut who founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS, in Petaluma, California, and he had a very spiritual and psychic experience while he was in space, not surprisingly, and a lot of astronauts have. Not all of them have talked about it, but and a lot of very prominent people have as well. But there's the stigma attached to it, although it's getting less and less. I mean, in mainstream news, they're talking about UAPs now. So that before that was completely fringe, nutty stuff, and now congressional hearings and about UAPs, what they used to call UFOs. They try to make it.
Yeah, my son was saying that. He says, "Mom, they don't say UFOs anymore," because I was telling him about you coming on Teatime, and he's like, "Mom, they don't say UFO anymore." And I was like, "What?" No,
they don't. They call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, because supposedly that sounds less woo-woo than
woo-woo. I like the woo-woo.
Yeah, that's the woo-woo factor that you have to worry about.
But I'm very spiritual, and I'm very I know I have some psychic abilities. I just don't listen to them because it's like you. When I go to a party, I hear different voices in that, and I hear voices that I know that others can't see, and I've been really guarded on sharing and expressing that to people. When I get into a large room, sometimes it gets too noisy for me, and it's not the noise that's in the room; it's the noise that they cannot see that's in the room, and I'm just like, I really can't come. I really can't do this. And I feel the energies. The energies are really loud, and the intuition is really, really loud. Like I can tell when someone doesn't really want to be there, but is there, or
and all their attachments too. And then they might have relatives or friends that are in the beyond who are hanging around them, trying to, and what happens if you're an intuitive psychic person, they are attracted to you. It's like you have this big magnet. I call it it's like a lightning rod, the spirits will come to you because, this person sees me and they hear me. So I'm going to go, and then they glom onto you, and then it becomes, just.
It comes at crazy party, doesn't it? It just like, I'm very guarded with who I talk to about it because I have been in a psychiatric ward. In my personal story, that's in many books. Many people know that I've been put in psychiatric wards for a lot of different reasons, right? And I actually felt more at home in those places than I did in the outside world, if that made any sense to people.
It does make sense. It does. And there's a lot of stigma attached to that. But I'll tell you this. I had a guy that I knew, he was a psychiatrist, and I asked him, I gave him a copy of my first book, right? And I said, "Doctor, have you ever thought that maybe people who are diagnosed as schizophrenic or having delusions or whatever, could they just be extremely psychic but don't know how to deal with it?" And he said that is, and he looked at me kind of in horror because he hadn't thought about it, and he said, "That's a very frightening thought." And this is a professional psychiatrist, and I caught him off guard with that comment. He had never thought about that maybe they just don't know how to manage. I call it managing. You can't really control so much as you can manage it. These, the psychic inputs, and it could just be people who have very strong psychic abilities and just are not able to manage them, or they might have some other thing going on too, but that just makes it that much worse. So I think that's something that I think a lot of people should consider.
Yeah. And you make a good point there, Bruce, because that does make a lot of sense. There's so many voices in schizophrenia, and many don't even understand what schizophrenia is. Right. They just right away, he's a whack. He because they don't hear and see things, right? It's like a medium. They don't hear and see what the medium can pick and read. Right. You can feel the energies, and you can feel when somebody is not being honest or being authentic. They're guarding something. There's that wall there.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I have kind of a funny story. I know it's a very serious topic, but I had kind of a funny story.
We can laugh. We can laugh.
I'm a veteran. I'm a veteran, and I'm a disabled veteran, and I go to the Long Beach VA hospital. That's where I get my medical care, which is wonderful. I think the VA, I know a lot of people criticize the VA, but they've been so good to me. And I was doing an intake, and they do the counseling, they do the physical part, all that, the whole gamut, you know. And I was talking to one of the nurses who was in the psychology department, and she gave me this form to fill out because they want to know if you're suicidal, because unfortunately there's 22 veterans every day who commit suicide in America. It's just terrible, but so they're very good about that. So I was filling it out, and one of the questions was, do you hear voices of people who are not there? Do you see people who other people cannot see? So I was looking at the form, and I thought about it, and I looked at the nurse, and I said, you know, my answer to those questions are yes, but I'm not going to mark it on your form. I'm not going to put that on the form, but just to let you know, yes, I do. I'm very psychic, so I do. And she just looked at me like her jaw dropped, you know, and she just accepted that. She said, that's fine. You just put no on there, but the real answer is yes. Because
why do you think that they're so scared of that yes?
It's because they want to be able to, they treat it as something that is negative and bad. It's got to be bad. It's got to be
because they don't understand it. That's what it is.
They don't understand it. They're afraid of it. And because if they accept that, then they got to accept, well, maybe the people that we've just put in a pigeonhole box somewhere are really vital people that just need a little bit of help. You know, to, as I always say, you got to keep one foot in this world, and you can every once in a while, you know, dance around with another foot in the other world, but you got to be able to, you know, get back into it. And maybe they just kind of lost their way, you know, they just have lost their footing, and they need to get that one foot back in. And I think if they approach it that way, it would be better. It's the reality of it. And I think things are changing slowly in psychology. You know, they're not automatically dismissing people who study parapsychology like they used to. It was a pseudoscience. It's not real. But you can do very simple tests. Like I teach a paranormal history class at Citrus, which is just a whole other weird story in and of itself.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you what that was, because I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, it's through community education, but the college authorized me to teach a paranormal history class, which is just wonderful. They're very forward thinking to even do that, because there's not too many colleges that would allow that. But in that class, we do experiments. And one of them is the being stared at experiment, where you take turns and you turn your back to somebody. They're looking at the back of your head, or they're not looking at the back of your head. And you have to discern, are they looking at me or not looking at me, without, you know, having your head, you know, your back turned to them. And most people in all the trials that we do are much greater than chance. They get it right, like 75% of the time, which is much, you know, 50-50 chance you get it right. Yeah. So, and that shows people have this innate ability, this psychic ability to, I mean, because how else would you know? Your eyes are not seeing them, you know, so how do you know if they're looking at you or not? But people have that feeling. And even people who say there's no such thing as the paranormal will say, oh yeah, you know, I felt people staring at me. Well, how can you do that? You don't have eyes in the back of your head, but they do. So when people start to think about it, you know, they'll use terms like, well, I had my gut feeling I shouldn't go in there, in that building or whatever, and then find out, oh, there's something terrible that happened in there or was going to happen. Premonitions, you know, things like that. Everybody has had those things, but they just don't classify it as, you know, they want to think, oh, well, that's not paranormal, but it is paranormal. You know, it's natural.
Yeah.
It's very natural. And, you know, I think we're getting to a point where, like Gene said, it's much, you know, maybe I couldn't have, you know, written these books 10 years ago. Maybe it had to be in 2016 when he told me that was the time to do it. So I think the timing was right. And of course, now with the UFO and alien stuff, the timing is right for that too. And now all the, you know, people, the debunkers who were saying, oh, these folks are crazy, you know, talking about this, they're just nuts, you know, and now they have to, well, then why are congressmen and, you know, members of Congress looking at this seriously now? Why is the Defense Department have a dedicated, you know, in the sunshine, you know, not in the hidden recesses of the Pentagon, researching this stuff, even though I have a lot of problems with how they're presenting it, but still they're doing it. So it's because it is real. It is
Yeah.
real, and people are starting to, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't have made fun of people. Maybe that was a bad thing, what we did.
Yeah. So why do you feel that there's so much stigma around paranormal life? Why are people so scared of it?
Well, part of it is just they've been taught to be afraid of it. Well, I'll just tell you, like when I went to school, my first day in kindergarten, I remember telling my teacher about the invisible friends that I had, which I saw.
Imaginary friends.
My imaginary friends. And I
Yep.
think the official term is imaginal. That's where they are real, but other people may or may not be able to see them. So my imaginal friends, John and Johnny. I wasn't very creative with the names, but anyway, John and Johnny. One was
Johnny
older.
Johnny's pretty cute. I mean,
John and Johnny, yeah. Johnny was a little kid. John was kind of he wasn't a very friendly, he was a man, he was a grown man, but he wasn't very friendly, but kind of a protector. And anyway, so I mentioned, and they said, oh, no, that's not real. Don't talk about that. You'll make the other kids scared, So I told my mom, and she said, well, maybe you shouldn't talk about that. And, it's okay to talk to me about it, but be careful who you talk to. So that's where I first learned that, oh, I can't always say exactly what's going on. There's some people that aren't going to handle it well. So I learned pretty quickly. And I think people are afraid. Like that psychiatrist, that was a fearful thing to him, that he may be dealing with people who are extremely psychic, who may know what he's thinking, or at least his, intentions are, that kind of thing. So that frightens people. It frightens people. And they're, and then there's also the religious connotations where they don't understand, that this is a natural thing. They might think it's demonic, and there is demonic stuff out there. I'm not saying
there is. There
isn't negative stuff, because there is. So that, there's good reason to be afraid of that. But in general, there's a lot of good stuff, mostly good stuff, actually. And so that people have a fear. They want a very simple explanation that doesn't boggle their mind or challenge their belief system, and whatever that belief system is. But then when you talk to somebody, like, they'll say, well, what is prayer? Well, I'm praying to God. Well, how, that's kind of, as a preacher, I had a guest speaker who was a pastor, and he came in, and he was cool. He came in there, and he said, hey, if God isn't paranormal, who is?
And it's true, right? Because nobody sees them.
Yeah.
But everyone believes in him. Well, not everyone believes in him, but I mean.
Yeah. And then prayer is that communication. What is it? It's like meditation. It's like communication, with those that have passed on, or aliens, or whatever else. It's using your senses that we all have, that we just don't, it's like muscles that atrophy if you don't use them. You have to exercise them, and anybody can do it. Everybody has it. But I always say there's some people that have a little bit more than others. It's kind of like, I love baseball, and in baseball, there's some people, everybody can throw a ball, but some people can throw it 90 miles an hour. That's, there's some people that just have that, that natural ability. And then if they train it, it gets even, to this ridiculous level. So, there are some people that can, everybody's got some talent, some super talent. They just have to figure out what it is. And I think that's what it is. And so there's fear based on that. And, there could be other, there's also like I did, I was in denial because of my job considerations, working as a defense contractor and on government contracts. I had a top secret clearance at one point. I would lose that clearance instantly if I still had one. I don't have one anymore, but if they read the books and started reading that, they'd say, oh, this person is, not trustworthy.
Yeah.
When actually you're being very trustworthy, because you're being very honest.
Yeah, you're being very open.
And who would want to bring that ridicule on themselves unless they were being truthful about it? And that being said, I know there's charlatans out there, and that's why, people always ask me. I have people write to me, I need to find a psychic that I can talk. And I said, well, you got to start with people that you know and trust, that you love, who may know somebody, and start that. But don't just find somebody and assume they're going to be a good person, because they might not be. They might just want your money and not do anything, or they might be, malevolent, even at the worst, case. So you got to be very, very careful.
Well, there
And
is a lot of that out there, right? There's a lot
yeah.
of that fraudster out there. Like I can see, but they can't see, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of tell you a story where you fill in the blanks,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then they're like, see, I told you. I went to one lady who read my cards, and she said,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, you have 3 kids. I said, no. And then she's like, well, I think you have 2 boys. I said, no. And then she just kept fishing, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're just, I'll just give you my $35 and
Yeah.
and we're done.
Lesson
Like,
learned. Yeah,
yeah, but
exactly.
there
No.
are people out there that actually can, you know,
Yeah.
and it's hard for the ones that actually can, because we're so guarded, because we're scared of that judgment, we're scared of that stigma, right? It's like me with the tea, and this is why I do tea time. A lot of people will say, well, Liz, what is the tea for you? Well, the tea is the past, the present, and the future. It's
Mm-hmm.
teaching education awareness. It's teaching that from the past we can educate in the present, and we can be aware of the future,
Mm-hmm.
because we never know what the future is going to bring for any of us.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, there's good and bad in everything. There's good and bad in human life form as
Mm-hmm.
well, not just the paranormal life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have war, we have peace in all identities, you know, but people don't see it that way. They're so fast to judge what they don't understand. And
Yeah.
that's what I do, is I open the door and I say, listen, we have to start talking about things that we don't understand in order for us to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Because
always got to. I tell my students that same thing. You know, when I'm in history, I tell them you can't always be in your comfort zone.
yeah,
You know, and this whole idea in education, it's kind of I think, not a good idea. I know what people are trying to do. They want people to be comfortable in the sense they don't want to feel threatened at school or whatever, but you can't try to make people so comfortable that they're not learning.
yeah,
Because I'm going to tell students, we'll talk about stuff that is disturbing. You know, I mean, war is disturbing. You know, all the stuff that has happened in our history is disturbing, but we can't hide from it. And coming out of your comfort zone is how you learn and how you grow.
yeah.
If it's done in the right way, you know, not like a shock kind of thing, you know, but just, you know, being real about stuff. And I think you're right. That is very important for growth as a human being.
Well, we have to start teaching in a different way too. You know, if we stay in the same pattern, we're staying in the stale water. You know, we're not opening the minds to different,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding why there's so much stigma on mental health, and why there's so much
Mm-hmm.
stigma on grief, and all the hard subjects that is worldwide. It's not just Canada, not just USA. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? So when we start opening up and having open discussions, deep open discussions, honest discussions, you know, where it might make you uncomfortable. And that's why I do the disclaimer that it might make you uncomfortable, because there are topics that need to be discussed in order for us to make changes. If we don't talk, we don't change nothing,
Yeah,
you know?
that is true. We have to have the dialogue. And
Yeah.
I always quote Malcolm X, who said that the way to solve race problems is if everybody is just honest with each other. Just sit down at the table and put everything out, you know, all your cards on the table, and then you can see the ugliness that you're hanging on to, the poison, and then you can sort it all out, throw it away, and start over, and just say, okay, I'm going to, you know, take you one person at a time. You know, you're a person, I'm a person. But we don't take that kind of inventory.
No.
We don't seem to have the time or the courage. Most people don't have the courage to do that,
Yeah.
to be that honest. And because it's not really rewarded, unfortunately. You know, people that are really honest are punished. They lose their
Yeah.
jobs. You know, this terrible stuff happens if, you know, it's the
Or
old
they get
saying,
locked up.
yeah, no good deed goes unpunished, like my
Yeah.
dear departed friend David Wilson used to say. It shouldn't stop you from doing the right thing, but it's certainly a disincentive for people.
Yeah. So I want to get into your tea, Bruce. What would your tea be? So if I give you the word TEA and I ask you
Yeah.
for a word for each letter, what words would you give me?
Well, I thought about it a great deal, because I thought about it and I gave it a lot of thought, and I finally came up with tenacious, enthusiastic acceptance.
What was your E again?
Enthusiastic. And the classical definition of enthusiasm is having is God, and it's very spiritual. It's God inspired, or having God inside of you, or being inspired by God, in the presence of God. That's enthusiasm. That's where the word enthusiasm comes from. So I really like, and I've always liked that term, and I use it when I'm teaching too. This idea that how do you get through to young students? Well, first of all, you got to love what you do, and
Yeah.
what is that? How does that manifest itself? It manifests itself by being enthusiastic. You have a calling, and it's like if you want to call it God or the higher spirit or higher power, it exudes through you, and people respond to that. They can't help but respond to it. This person's excited about what they do, and
Yeah.
it makes you want to listen and learn, and rather than facing somebody who's just just going over something they don't even care about. I mean, how boring is that? That's as boring as it gets. So,
Yeah.
and everybody's going to turn off. So anyway, yeah. So enthusiasm and acceptance. I mean, in terms of not like, oh, I just gotta, just give up. I don't mean like that. I mean, like there's certain things we cannot change, and there's certain things we can change, and the courage to realize that and quit beating your head against the wall about things that you can't change the past, for instance. You can only move on from here, and that kind of what they call in counseling, they call it radical acceptance. It's very, very difficult to do, but it removes a lot of the problems that keep us down by radically accepting the way the world is. It's a terrible, terrible things happen, whether it's these school shootings or whatever. We just have to accept that is the reality that we deal with. That doesn't mean we can't change that reality, but we can't deny that this exists, and going from there, we can be empowered to make changes to that reality.
And your T was tenacity. Why did you pick that word?
I love the word tenacity, and I think I got that from my parents. They were very tenacious. Each of them had only 6 years of formal education, but they're two of the smartest people that I've ever met. And my mom, especially, she was very intuitive. She's very psychic. But she would do things like when I was a kid, she noticed that I was watching all these cowboy and Indian movies, and they're just ridiculous. It wasn't the right story of the West, but that's what I was learning, right? So she took me once when I was like 11 years old. She took me downtown Seattle, and Native Americans were having a protest. And they were protesting. The Army was turning Fort Lawton. They were going to sell it to a bunch of condo developers and golf course developers. And the Indians showed up and they said, wait a second, this was our land to begin with. We'd like to make a cultural center. We want to set up things for, school for Indian children to keep our culture alive. And of course, the condo and golf people were winning because they had more money and power. So the Indians were, they were beating drums. They had a fire. They were dancing. My mom took me down there without really explaining too much. She just took me there because she knew I had something to learn. And she said, you should listen to them. And I said, that's the first time I've ever met a real Indian, before, because they'd always just been like on a TV character.
Yeah. Well, that's all you've seen, right? Was on the TV.
She did stuff like that. She took me to an opera, for God's sakes, when I was 10 years old. Who would take a 10-year-old to an opera? But, I became a playwright, because I remember that. And I'm a musician too. I remember all that stuff. She only had 6 years of education, but how intuitive and smart is that? It's like, and they also got me a typewriter when I was a little kid, and I was typing, pretending I could type. And then I learned how to write and learned how to type. And they knew early on, that's what we need to do for this kid.
So do you like the sound of the typewriter? Like the old typewriters?
Yes, I loved, and it was a old Royal manual typewriter. Yeah.
I'm looking
wonderful.
for like the oldest antique. I want to do memoirs on that. I want to, and everybody said, use your laptop. And I was like, no, I want the old, and I want the old vintage paper. And they're like, but it's not going to be put on print like that. I said, I don't care, but my own original copy will be on that paper.
Yeah.
Because I'm very into the history, right? Into where I came from, how I got there, where I get this stubbornness from and this hard head from sometimes, and where I always get the questions. Like, I like to push, I like to poke, and I'm just like, that doesn't make sense to me. Tell me why you think it's this way, And then I was always told, well, stop asking questions and don't talk about that, like yourself, right? And as a child, I find that kind of holds us back as well as individuals, because when we grow up, we're just like, do we say it? Do we not say it? Do we, Are we allowed to say it? So now I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to say it and see where it goes. And I'm going to ask that question and see if I get an answer. Where before it was always like, well, we'll get to it later, or we'll tell you later, or don't talk about that, you know?
Yeah. Well,
Now,
that's tenacity. That is tenacity. That is a person who does not give up, and a
no, I
person who keeps pushing. And I mean, I married, Ginger, and there's no more tenacious person than Ginger. She's, I'm really a big guy. I'm 6'3", 260 pounds. She's like just barely 5 feet tall, but she is tough. I mean, and tenacious.
tough cookie.
And she's a helicopter pilot. In fact, she's one of the few women helicopter pilots who's also an instructor pilot. So
Oh,
that's very much a man's world, that whole aviation thing. And we'd go flying together. Just to give you a funny example, we'd go flying together and we'd stop at a small airport to get fuel. And we walk into the office, and me and Ginger, and the guys in the office would automatically think I was the pilot in command. They'd say, okay, you need some fuel. Okay, you need. I said, no, you got to talk to the pilot in command. That's this little lady right here. That's Ginger. She's in charge. They assumed I was in charge. I'm this big guy, but no, she's doing it.
so she's
So
a tough
yeah,
cookie.
that
Does she
takes
come from Norway?
tenacity.
Does Ginger come from Norway, Bruce?
No, she has her mother has Spanish and Mexican heritage, and her father was kind of a Heinz 57 European, kind of a mix.
Oh, she got that European blood. She's got that tough cookie
Yeah,
blood in her.
she's half and half, but man, she is very tenacious. So there's a reason why we got together, because when we work together, nothing stops us. Of course, then we go like this every once in a while, but then we compromise, which is what you learn you have to do.
Yeah, Susie Vibero is in here from Room Redux, and she says that Miss Liz is tenacious. She does know me personally, so she knows that I don't give up. I just keep pushing
Yeah.
the limits, and I believe that comes a lot from my heritage.
Hmm.
I've done a lot of research. I've gone back to, I think it's 1716. And I just met a cousin that lives in Norway who's actually doing, because we had a book published with our family named The Thronus.
Hmm.
And it's all in Norwegian. So he's putting it into English. So he's actually connected with some of us. And I think it's a year now that we've known each other, and we're planning on doing a family reunion in Norway. So yeah.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
it's really incredible how heritage always comes back to the present, right? And
Hmm.
it always comes and finds us in a different way.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. When I go, my brother and I still own the old farm that my parents had, and that where my dad was born. That's actually, my sister was born there too. And whenever I go back there, I go up onto above the house and below the mountains, and there's an old Viking graveyard there. And it's not marked or anything. Just everybody who lives there knows that's where the Viking settlement was. And I stand on that earth and I feel the connection. No other place on earth feels like that. And I always tell my students, if you have some place like that on earth where you can go, please go there, because you'll feel more connected than you've ever been. And it's just a wonderful feeling. And then I did all this discovery of what is the Viking spirit, and it's not just about bloodthirsty people invading Ireland or whatever. There's a lot of a lot to it, that it comes through in modern day too. This idea of egalitarianism, where men and women are equal, and all this. I mean, it's really pretty cool when you discover it. This idea of how I always feel most comfortable outside. Norwegians are very much like that. They love to be outside. And school children, at least 3 days a week, when my children went to school in Norway, when I was there as a Fulbright teacher, they 3 or 4 days a week they go, or 3 days a week they go outside in the forest, even when it was snowing in the wintertime, and they go out there and they did their lessons out there. And the Norwegians say, hey, they have to learn how to deal with nature. That's part of their life. They can't just hide in a building all the time.
Yeah, I was blowing bubbles on New Year's I was like, I got to go blow bubbles at midnight on New Year's in the freezing cold. And I was just like, I just got to be outside. I have to start a new year outside. I
Yeah.
can't be inside. I can't be in this building saying Happy New Year's and starting a new year. I have to be outside. And I was blowing bubbles at 12 o'clock at night in my
That's a cool
backyard. And
idea.
I was just like, and it gives a new meaning for a new year, right? As well,
Mhm.
because you're popping the bubble. What are you going to open in the new year? You
Mhm.
know, so it was pretty cool, and it was freezing cold because it was wintertime,
Mhm.
and the bubbles were kind of freezing, but then they were snapping, and it was kind of like
Mhm.
crack pop like the Rice Krispie.
Mhm.
So it brings back the childhood, right? It brings back that little girl
Oh yeah.
and where you could play, because I wasn't allowed to play when I was little. I had to be really seen but not heard,
Oh.
like, so there was a lot. So now I play a lot. I'm just like, I get goofy. I had a mud fight with my daughter. We got pulled over by police, and the police were like, is everything okay? I was like, yeah, I just beat my kid up with a bunch of mud. Like,
Yeah,
she's
that's the
fine, I'm
problem.
fine, we're just dirty, we'll go home and shower. Like,
Yeah. Well, you can see like behind me that I got all these old toys there from my
yeah,
childhood.
it was what I was looking at. That I was like inspecting as you were talking. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, I love being surrounded by things from my childhood because in some ways, I mean, I publish comic books because comic books is how I learned how to read. I just like to stay connected to my whole, you know, the little person inside of me and the big person I am now, and we all want to be, we want to be together. So
Yeah.
I just feel very comfortable that way. So this is my creation spot where I do all my writing and thinking and
But
talking to nice people like you.
and I also noticed the word peace above your head.
Yeah, yeah. Ginger made that for me. It lights up, but I think I need new batteries in there. But yeah, she made that for me, and yeah, it's something we all want, but the reality of the world is that there's so many forces working against that. But that doesn't mean we have to give up though. Just
Yeah.
got to work harder.
Yeah. I love that the word peace is there amongst the story that you're telling the world, right? Because there is peace in the paranormal life.
Yeah.
It's not all bad, it's good. You
Hmm.
know, you also do music. I want to get into the music before we wrap up your tea time because the time is just flying by. We're really enjoying ourselves.
I
And
know.
for
Yeah.
anybody that's watching the replay, please let me know where you're tuning in. If you're tuning in now and you have any questions, please reach out. And if you can't reach Bruce, you can reach Miss Liz, and Miss Liz will reach Bruce for you because we're going to stay connected, because that's what I do with all my guests is I stay connected with you guys during, before, and after. So
Cool.
yeah, you ain't getting rid of me that easy.
Yeah. No, that's great.
That's just how I work. We have tea for life now. We don't know where the future is going to lead us, right?
Hmm.
So I want to know a little bit about the music, because I did check out the music, because you did send me some. You sent me a beautiful PowerPoint here, and
Hmm.
I got to check out some of your music as well. So where did the music come from?
Well, it's also from the where all creative things come from. It's the quantum world, the spirit world, the alien world. It's all the same thing. There's everything is available there. So you just draw down from it. Or as my playwriting professor said, you want to collect the butterflies. And
Oh,
it's there, these butterflies of creativity, and you just gently bring it down and you examine it and you write it down, and then there goes the butterfly. So the music, when I write music, I write songs, I write the music and the lyrics, and I have a band that's been together for 20, almost 25 years. Two of us have been together 25 years, the others almost 20 years. But my favorite thing is when I write a song just on my guitar at home, and then I bring it in, and the whole band is together, and we work on it together. And it's kind of like a metaphor for how it works when people have a similar goal in mind. Everybody wants to do a good job putting the song together, and they all put their own part into it. Our bass player is very creative. Our drummer's very good. He hears the song differently than I do. And the lead singer, guitarist, the other guitarist, he's a writer too. So we all contribute to it, and it becomes something even more special than what I had originally imagined it to be. But the topics just come, they just float in like a butterfly, and I go, oh, that'd be cool. That sounds good. Or I'll, if I have a little bit of irony in it, that's always good. There's some of my songs are very emotional. Some of them are happier, and some of them are, you know, more sad. But it depends, and it's funny how, you know, I'm not an expert in music, but I do know chord structure and notes and stuff, and I do know, you know, certain types of notes are like minor chords usually bring a lot of emotion, more sadness. In fact, I think the church at one point would not allow music to be done in minor chords because it was too emotional for people, so it had to be
Oh,
major chords. So they know the power of music, and we all, I think we all do, whether we understand music or not. We understand the power of it because it can make you feel. You might not remember the lyrics or the tune, but you remember how it made you feel,
yep.
and that's what music does. It goes right to the soul, and that's why I love it. It's another way to express myself, how I have experienced the world, and it's a healing thing for me. And being with the band is even better because we're all like working on it together, and it's such a cooperative, communal thing. I just love it. And but we always take a hiatus. We work on a project, and then we'll not get together for months, and then all of a sudden we'll get back together, a frenzy of activity, and then another months long hiatus. But so that, yeah, so the writing process and the music process are very similar, and the psychic process. I think that's just that connection, and there doesn't seem to be an end to it. It just keeps happening and keeps going on and on. It's like I don't think you ever stop. You know, it just keeps going, and even beyond this life, as you
Yeah.
know, Gene has told me, he's still creating things and helping me, you know, understand things, and I share that with his loved ones, and they appreciate that because, you know, they don't have the psychic connection, although they feel him oftentimes. They don't necessarily talk to him, and so I'm able to help them, you know, do that. And so anyway, that's just a little bit about the music. I've been doing it a long time. My mom always wanted me to be a musician, and I was very stubborn when I was younger. I played the accordion, but I didn't like it. So then I later in life I took up the guitar. So which but I still like I like accordion music. I just love the accordion. It's just very difficult to play. The guitar is
I love the flow of it, the
yeah.
accordion.
It's like it's breathing, you know,
Yeah.
it's like you're breathing. So
Yeah.
like
When I was a
singing.
little girl, I was really impressed on how it opened and closed and how the
Hmm.
sounds would come out of it. I'd be like really engaged. I'd be like, oh, oh. And sometimes I get too close and they'd be playing and they'd be like, I'll snap your nose. I'd be like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. The bellows in the middle there. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would get like right into it. I'd be like, and the spoons. I love the sound of spoons,
Hmm.
and the whistle of the jug. Like I tell my kids this since they were little. I'm like, your mom's gonna play a banjo one day. I swear to God, I will. I will learn how to play the banjo. I just am connected to that music, that time, that era of the relaxing and connecting, like collecting the butterflies, like you said. I really love
Yeah,
that term, collecting the butterflies.
yeah. The
It
banjo is a
really
great sound.
resonates.
Yeah, banjo is a great sounding instrument. And yeah, I appreciate, you know, I don't consider myself you know, a very skilled musician. I'm more of a songwriter. I use the instrument to help me write the song, you know, the music. But you know, I don't, like, I can play a little bit of piano, I can play a little bit of drums, I can play a little bit of every instrument, just enough to kind of, you know, understand it. But
Yeah.
I'm not skilled, you know, like I'm not the lead guitarist because I can't play leads, you know. So we have a lead guitarist who's very, very good. My thing is just more the songwriting, the lyrics, and the melody, you know, to come up with it to begin with, and then they take it from there and make it a beautiful thing.
So have you turned any of your music into playwrights?
We've recorded some of our music and used it in some of our plays and some of the plays that I've produced. But it's, you know, it's just, I do it just for fun. And when the band plays, we do it just for fun, you know, locally. I think the most people we've ever played for is a couple hundred people, you know, that's about it. And, but we're not in it for the money. We're just in it for artistic expression. And,
Yeah.
you know, like like my comic books, you know, I do the same thing. It'd be nice to make the money back that it costs to produce it. But, you know, that's beyond that. It's up to whatever, you know, whatever happens. So, and it's just another way to express yourself in this world, and it makes me. It's very gratifying, to express yourself artistically. And I've always been a frustrated comic book artist since I was a little kid, and made my own comics when I was little. And I did a comic strip when I was in engineering school at Butte, Montana, in 1982. And then 37 years later, I picked up that character I created in 1982, and then I published my first comic book. So you just never know when the time is going to be right to bring it up again. And so now I think I just published my third comic that just came out this week. So
if anybody would like to get that comic, where could they get that?
You can get it on Amazon. If you look up my name, Bruce Solheim, you'll see there's 2 Snark comics, and the new comic is Dr. Jekyll, Alien Hunter, which is kind of a neat comic because it has a female lead character. She's a professor. She's not a superhero, and she's just a regular person, but she has extraordinary adventures. So it's all my stuff is all ages, because I don't want to exclude any group of people. And I think it's very approachable, and you could read it to your kids, or kids can read it. There's nothing harmful in there. I think it's it's just so much fun, because you can really do anything with words and pictures.
Yeah.
And it's another medium of expression that like I said, I owe a great deal to comics, because that's how I learned how to read. I struggled to learn how to read, and visualizing it and seeing the action, and okay, I understand the words now. And then that's how I owe a lot to comic books, that medium.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people that struggle to read, comic books actually help them understand how to read. I've heard that from a lot of people. My son was the same way when he was young. He hated reading, but give him a comic book and he was like, he could tell me the story. And I was like, oh, okay, let's do the comic book.
Yeah.
So any final words before we wrap up your tea time, Bruce, to the people that are out there that are listening and that will watch the replay? If you want to know more about Bruce, you can check him out at his website. It is up here, and it will be in the description as well in the audio platforms. So Bruce, any final words to anybody out there that is experienced paranormal life? Like, what message would you like to give to them before we wrap up?
Well, it's what my ancient alien mystic friend advisor tells me every time. He says, always keep love in your heart and operate from a position of love. And it sounds really easy. It sounds like, is that all there is to it? But try implementing that during the day. You're going to get challenged every single day. And if you look at it from a position of love, then you can understand even people who act mean to you or do mean things. You try to understand, why are they doing that? Yeah. And how am I going to react mean back and then just cause this cycle of violence or, anger? Or am I going to try to approach it in a more, and sometimes love is tough love. It doesn't mean you're a pushover. It just means I'm going to do the right thing. I know what's the right thing. And it's a loving thing because I'm trying to help. So, always keep love in your heart and operate from a position of love. So I'll just share that. It's very, it's simple, but it's difficult.
Nothing is easy, right? Nothing in the comfort zone grows. So,
No.
You have to get out of the comfort zone. And I really want to thank you, Bruce, for taking the time and sitting and having tea with me today and sharing your tea, because you do serve a strong tea. So keep doing what you're doing, and let's stay connected. Let's grow together, and let's really make a difference and open some doors, break that stigma on paranormal life. We don't need to be scared of it. Let's start to understand it instead of being scared. Let's take the fear away. And thank you again for joining me. Thank you to all the viewers that tuned in today and that are listening right now. I really appreciate your support. We are closing up May and we are heading into June. So in June, I'm bringing you a bunch of June berries. That means a lot of flavor, lots of blends. So if you want to know what's coming to the table in June, check out Miss Liz's Tea Times. Check out my website at www.misslizsteaparties.com. You will see the incredible guests that are coming. And we do have some topics that may be triggering, so be aware of that as well. There is a disclaimer out there, and if I need to get it stronger, let me know. I will put that out there as well. I'm not here to trigger anyone. I'm only here to bring awareness and to inspire everyone out there. So again, thank you, Bruce, for tuning in with me and sitting and having tea. And thank you to all of you out there who do make a difference with your teas. Share your teas, spill your teas, and let's educate the world and make a difference together. So thank you again. And I will see you June 2nd, I believe, with the first tea time for June. And I will be bringing in Gerald Everett Jones, and we will be talking about book banning. That's all I'm saying for June. For the rest, check out the Facebook page and the website. Thank you all. And I will see you for a new tea time next year. Not next year, next month with a new tea time. Thank you all for joining me today on Tea Time with Miss Liz.